The bridge exploded at 0347 hours. Captain Jordan Hale felt the shockwave before he heard it, a pressure wave that slammed through his chest like a fist. Rock and twisted metal rained into the narrow valley as Bravo 12's only escape route vanished into fire and smoke. "Contact left, contact right." Sergeant Marcus Webb's voice cut through the chaos, already hoarse from shouting. Hale pressed himself against the canyon wall, feeling the cold stone through his tactical vest. His leg throbbed where shrapnel had torn through his cargo pocket, nothing critical, but enough to slow him down. Around him, 11 Rangers scrambled for cover as tracer rounds carved burning paths through the darkness. The valley was a kill zone, 60 meters wide, steep walls rising on both sides, textbook ambush terrain. Hale had known it was risky, but the intel said the pass was clear. Intel was wrong. "UAVs down!" Corporal Sarah Chen yelled from behind a boulder. Lost the feed 30 seconds before the bridge went. Not an accident. Nothing here was an accident. Muzzle flashes erupted from the ridgeline east, west, and now north. They were surrounded on 3 sides, pinned against the southern cliff face with nowhere to go. Hale counted positions, 20 visible shooters, probably more in reserve. His radio crackled with static. "Bravo 12, this is Overwatch. Say again the transmission died in a wash of electronic noise. "They're jamming us," Lieutenant David Park said, sliding down next to Hale. Blood streaked Park's face from a cut above his eyebrow. "Can't reach battalion. Can't call for fire support." A younger Ranger Private Thompson, barely 22, pressed his back against the rocks, breathing too fast. His eyes were wide, unfocused. "We're trapped. Jesus Christ, we're trapped." "Steady," Hale said, but his voice lacked conviction. Red laser dots appeared on the cliff above them, dancing across the rock face. Designators. Someone up there was calling targets, preparing for a coordinated assault. Thompson's rifle slipped in his shaking hands. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over. We can't." "Shut it," Webb snapped. But the damage was done. The words hung in the cold mountain air like a curse. Other faces turned toward Hale, looking for reassurance he couldn't give. The enemy had numbers, position, and time. Bravo 12 had 11 effective soldiers, limited ammunition, and no support coming. Basic arithmetic. Hale keyed his dead radio out of habit. "If anyone can hear this, Bravo 12 is boxed in, grid November 73482. We're going to make them work for it." He thought about his kids. Emma would be starting 4th grade next month. Michael had his first baseball game on Saturday. Hale had promised to be there. "Sir." Park's voice was steady despite everything. "Orders?" Before Hale could answer, the air split with a sound like canvas tearing. A insurgent commander on the northern ridge, distinguishable by his white head wrap, jerked backward and dropped. Just dropped, as if someone had cut his strings. No warning, no preceding sound. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then a second man fell. Then a third. "Sniper!" Someone shouted in Pashto from above. "Sniper!" But from where? Hale's training took over before his brain caught up. He scanned the terrain, looking for the shooter's position, the angle of impact, the timing between shots, the way the targets fell. "Impossible," he breathed. Park stared at the bodies. "What? What is it? That's not from the ridgeline. That's not even from close range." Hale's mind raced through calculations. Bullet trajectory, fall rate, sound delay. That's coming from at least 1,000 meters, maybe more. "Nobody makes those shots in these conditions," Webb said. "Winds gusting to 20 knots, temperatures dropping, visibility." Another shot, another casualty. Hale felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, not yet, but the absence of certainty. The solid weight of expected death suddenly had cracks in it. "Someone's out there," he said quietly. "Someone's buying us time." Ridge 47 rose like a broken tooth against the night sky, 1,200 meters southwest of the valley floor. The wind here was vicious, cutting through tactical gear and biting exposed skin. Rock crumbled under gloved hands. The air was thin enough to make every breath feel inadequate. Evelyn Locke, call sign Raven, pressed her eye to the scope and let her body settle into stillness. She'd been climbing for 90 minutes, racing darkness and distance. Her muscles screamed from the ascent. Her shoulder ached where an old wound had never quite healed right. None of it mattered now. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, The valley floor appeared with crystalline clarity despite the low light. Thermal overlay painted heat signatures in shades of white and gray. She counted positions, marked leaders, identified the enemy's command structure by body language and positioning. 53 hostiles, maybe more in concealment. 11 friendlies clustered against the southern wall, their heat signatures tight with fear and desperation. She'd picked up their emergency transmission 40 minutes ago, a broken, static-filled plea for help that nobody else had heard. The encryption was old JSOC protocol, which meant these weren't regular army. Special operations. Rangers? Probably. Raven had been tracking a different target. A man named Kadir, a mercenary commander who'd once worked for Russian intelligence before going independent. The same man who'd orchestrated the ambush that killed her team 9 months ago. The same man who disappeared like smoke while she'd been pinned down, watching her friends die. She'd finally found his trail again 3 days ago, followed it to these mountains. And now, through cruel coincidence or fate, he was down there in that valley, commanding the force that was about to massacre another American unit. Full circle, she whispered to the wind. Her rifle was a heavily modified M24, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. Not the longest range weapon available, but familiar, reliable. She'd made this gun an extension of her will through 10,000 hours of practice. The distance reading on her rangefinder said 1,247 meters, well beyond the weapon's effective range under ideal conditions. These conditions were far from ideal. Wind speed at her position, 22 knots, gusting to 28. Wind direction, northwest, but channeling through the valley in unpredictable eddies. Temperature, 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and dropping. Barometric pressure, 27.4 inches and falling. She had 17 rounds. Standard doctrine said this was impossible. Standard doctrine said she should call it in, wait for proper support, engage from a more reasonable distance. Standard doctrine hadn't been there when her team died. Raven's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped from 60 beats per minute to 48. She became part of the mountain patient. Cold, inevitable. The enemy commander, Kadir himself, she was almost certain stood on the northern ridge gesturing to his subordinates, coordinating the final assault. In 30 seconds, maybe less, they'd pour fire into that valley and turn it into an abattoir. She adjusted for wind drift, corrected for the Coriolis effect, calculated the bullet drop nearly 40 feet at this range, accounted for the density altitude. The math was one thing. The execution was another. At 1,200 meters, the bullet would be in flight for roughly 2 seconds. 2 seconds for the wind to push it. 2 seconds for gravity to pull it. 2 seconds for 1,000 tiny variables to accumulate into failure. But Raven had learned long ago that math could only take you so far. The last 10%, the difference between near miss and kill, came from somewhere deeper. Instinct honed by repetition. The ability to read wind not through instruments but through how it felt on your skin, how it looked in the shimmer of distant air. She exhaled halfway and held it. Her finger took up the trigger slack with practiced smoothness. The world narrowed to a single point of focus, and she squeezed. The rifle's recoil drove into Raven's shoulder with familiar force. She absorbed it, stayed on target, watched. 2.1 seconds. Kadir's head snapped back. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Before his body hit the ground, Raven was cycling the bolt. The brass casing ejected in a glittering arc. A new round chambered with a metallic snap that she felt more than heard. Chaos erupted in the valley. Men shouted in 3 languages. Some dove for cover. Others froze, trying to understand what had just happened. Raven had already moved to her second target. A lieutenant, identifiable by how others had deferred to him minutes earlier, was pointing toward the southern ridge, barking orders. Wrong direction, but he was trying to organize a response. She compensated for a wind gust. Held high and right. Squeezed. The lieutenant fell. Sniper. The Arabic word carried across the distance. Sniper. Find him. Him. Always him. That assumption had saved her life more times than she could count. Target 3. A heavy weapons specialist setting up a PKM machine gun. If he got that weapon operational, the Rangers below would be shredded. The wind had shifted, she could feel it on her left cheek. See it in how the distant heat signatures wavered. She adjusted her point of aim, leading the movement by 3 mils. The shot broke clean. The machine gunner collapsed across his weapon. Down in the valley, Captain Hale was shouting orders she couldn't hear. His men were using the confusion, adjusting positions, laying down, suppressing fire. Good. They were professional enough to exploit the opening she'd given them. But they were still badly outnumbered. And now the enemy was adapting. 3 insurgents on the eastern ridge were scanning with optics, searching for her position. They'd never think to look this far out, but they'd figure it out eventually. Sound analysis, backtracking the bullet trajectory, simple process of elimination. She had maybe 5 minutes before they zeroed in on Ridge 47. Raven shifted her aim to a cluster of fighters preparing to assault the Ranger position. Close-range targets were easier, but at this distance, even a stationary man presented challenges. She was shooting at silhouettes, reading body language through thermal bloom, making split-second judgments about who was dangerous and who was simply trying not to die. Shot 4. Miss. The bullet passed close enough to make the target dive for cover, but that wasn't the same as a kill. 16 rounds left. Breathe, she told herself. Don't force it. The wind was picking up as the temperature dropped. Weather front moving in. That would affect every subsequent shot differently. Target 5. A man with a radio, trying to call for reinforcements. Communications were critical. She watched him for 3 seconds, timing his movement, waiting for him to pause. He stopped to adjust his equipment. She fired. He went down. Through her scope, Raven saw something that made her breath catch. Below, on the valley floor, Captain Hale was looking in her direction. Not at her, he couldn't possibly see her at this distance in this darkness, but toward her general position. His body language had changed. He stood straighter despite his injury. He'd figured out where the shots were coming from, and if he'd figured it out, others would too. Come on, Raven muttered, tracking her next target. Run, retreat, get out of there. But the enemy wasn't retreating. Not yet. They still had numbers, still had position. They were adapting to the threat of an invisible sniper the same way they'd adapt to artillery or air support, by dispersing, by taking cover, by sending hunters to find and eliminate the threat. Movement on the ridgeline caught her attention. 3 men, moving with purpose, carrying counter-sniper rifles. They were heading west, toward a position that would give them overlapping fields of fire with her location. Raven calculated angles and distances. From their new position, they wouldn't be able to see her directly, but they'd be able to pin her down, make it impossible for her to continue engaging. She could take them out, probably. But that would mean shifting her focus from the valley floor, where the Rangers were still in desperate need of covering fire. Tactical decision. Save herself or save them. Not even a question, really. She'd made this choice 9 months ago when she decided to come back to these mountains. Made it again when she climbed Ridge 47 instead of walking away. She kept her focus on the valley. Private Thompson was crying. He tried to hide it, pressing his face against the rock, but his shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. Eyes up, Private, Sergeant Webb said. Not unkindly, we're not dead yet. Not dead because of her, Lieutenant Park said, scanning the ridgelines. Whoever she is. Her? Webb raised an eyebrow. Hale nodded slowly, his mind churning through memories. The technique, the patience between shots. The way she's reading the battlefield, hitting command structure first, then fire support, then comms, that's not random. That's someone who's done this before. You know who it is, Park said. Not a question. Maybe. Hale's radio was still dead, but he kept it anyway. I worked with a JSOC sniper once. Evelyn Locke. Call sign Raven. Best I ever saw. She had this presence. Like she could slow down time. Make shots that weren't physically possible. Where is she now? Last I heard, retired. Medical discharge after her team got hit. She was the only survivor. Hale paused, watching another enemy fighter fall to an unseen bullet. Or maybe not retired. Webb pointed north. Sir, they're organizing. 3 teams moving up the western ridge. They're going after her. Hale saw it too. The enemy was splitting their focus, some maintaining pressure on Bravo, 1, 2, others hunting for the sniper. Smart tactics. Divide and conquer. How long can she hold them? Park asked. Against those odds? Hale shook his head. Not long. They'll triangulate her position, send drones, overwhelm her with numbers. So what do we do? Hale considered their options. They were still pinned down, still outnumbered, still cut off from support. But the dynamic had changed. The enemy was confused, cautious. Leadership was disrupted. That was an opening. We give her breathing room, he decided. Webb, take 3 men and work east. Make noise, make them think we're trying to flank. Park, you're with me. We push north, hard and fast. Make them choose between dealing with us or hunting her. Sir, with respect, that's suicide, Park said. So is sitting here waiting to die. Hale checked his rifle, confirmed his magazine was seated properly. That sniper is spending her life to buy us time. Least we can do is return the favor. Thompson looked up, tears still wet on his face. What about me? You're with Webb. Stay close, do what he says, and stay alive. Understood? Yes, sir. Hale caught Webb's eye, gave him a slight nod. Take care of the kid. Webb nodded back. On my mark, Hale said, his voice carrying to all 11 Rangers. We move fast, we move hard, and we make them remember they picked a fight with the wrong unit. Everyone clear? A chorus of affirmatives. Even Thompson's voice was steadier now. Then let's... Another shot cracked across the valley. An enemy fighter on the northern ridge tumbled backward off his perch. Hale smiled grimly. Let's give her something to work with. Raven tracked the 3 counter-snipers as they climbed. They were good, moving tactically, using cover, never exposing themselves for more than seconds at a time. But good wasn't the same as invisible. She put a round through the lead climber's center mass just as he paused to check his position. He fell backward, knocking into the man behind him. Both went tumbling down the scree slope in a clatter of loose rock and equipment. The third man dove into a crevice and stayed there. 14 rounds left. Raven's shoulder was on fire. Each recoil drove the rifle butt into the same spot, and without proper padding, the bruising had gone deep. Her hands were numb from the cold. Her back screamed from maintaining the prone position on bare rock for 40 minutes. She ignored all of it. Movement in the valley, the Rangers were pushing north, aggressive, stupid, brave. Don't, she whispered, though they couldn't hear her. Stay down, let me work. But they weren't staying down. They were drawing fire, pulling the enemy's attention, creating chaos, trying to help her. Damn them. A new problem, thermal signatures appearing on her flank, more climbers approaching from a different angle. These ones were coming up the backside of Ridge 47, where she had no line of sight until they crested the top. She checked her watch. They'd reach her position in 10 minutes, maybe less. Time to move. But if she moved, she'd lose her firing position, lose the ability to cover the Rangers. They'd be on their own again, and the numbers hadn't changed enough. They'd still die. Raven's hands were steady on the rifle, but inside, something was tearing apart. She remembered the last time she'd faced this choice. 9 months ago, different mountains, same impossible math. Her team had been ambushed, 3 shooters, 1 spotter, and her. The enemy had known they were coming, had prepared, had attacked with overwhelming force. Her team leader, Master Sergeant Ryan Cole, had ordered the retreat, cover, and move. She'd provided cover fire while they displaced, but the displacement turned into a rout, and the covering fire became a last stand. She'd had orders to pull back, orders to save herself, but pulling back meant leaving Ryan and the others to die alone. She'd stayed, had fought, had killed 11 enemy fighters before running out of ammunition. It hadn't been enough. Ryan had died with his hand on the radio, calling for fire support that never came. The spotter, a kid named Martinez, had bled out from a gut shot, crying for his mother. By the time Raven reached them, they were gone. She'd survived, somehow, crawled 3 miles with a dislocated shoulder and 2 cracked ribs, been picked up by a medevac 40 hours later, half dead from exposure and blood loss. The official report called it a heroic action, recommended her for a Silver Star. Raven called it failure. She'd promised Ryan once, years before, after a training accident that nearly killed them both. If something happens, if you don't make it, I'll keep going. I'll protect the ones who can't protect themselves. He'd laughed it off. Don't get maudlin on me, Raven. We're both too mean to die. But Ryan had died. And Raven had kept her promise the only way she knew how, by coming back to these mountains, hunting the men responsible, and refusing to let anyone else die on her watch. The climbers were closer now. 8 minutes out. Below, the Rangers were fully engaged, trading fire with an enemy force that still outnumbered them 3-1. Raven made her choice. She stayed. Hale felt the bullet pass close enough to ruffle his jacket. He dropped, rolled, came up behind a boulder, returned fire-chewed stone where he'd been standing. They're concentrated on the eastern approach, Park shouted from 30 meters away. Heavy resistance. Good. That meant they were pulling forces away from the main body. Meant the sniper had more room to work. Another distant crack. Another enemy fighter went down. She's still in position, Hale said into his radio, forgetting it was dead. Still fighting. Webb's voice came from somewhere to the right, raised in a battle cry. Grenades detonated in rapid succession. Machine gun fire answered, then went silent as Webb's team eliminated the position. The enemy was folding. Not routing, not yet, but the confidence was gone. They'd come expecting an easy kill, a trapped unit with no hope and no support. Instead, they were being carved apart by an invisible angel of death and a ranger unit that refused to die quietly. Hale saw an opportunity. A gap in the enemy line where 3 fighters had moved to reinforce another position. He signaled, Park, pointed. Park nodded. They moved together, covering each other, clearing the gap in seconds. Now they had high ground, better position, better firing angles. All units, push hard, Hale ordered, then remembered the radio situation. He just started shooting, and hoped his men understood the message. They did. The Rangers surged forward as one, overwhelming the enemy's weakened positions through sheer momentum and fury. An explosion shook the valley. Someone had hit an ammunition cache. Secondary explosions rippled through the enemy's staging area. The tide was turning. Raven heard them before she saw them, loose rock clattering, harsh breathing in the thin air. The climbers had reached the ridge top. She had 7 rounds left and no time to relocate. She set down her rifle carefully, drew her sidearm a SIG P226 with suppressor, and melted into the rocks. The first man appeared 10 meters away, scanning with night vision. She put 2 rounds through his goggles before he could call out. He dropped without a sound. The second came faster, already firing. Rounds sparked off rock by her head. She dropped flat, rolled left, came up shooting. 3 rounds center mass. He went down hard. The third was smarter. Stayed in cover, used suppressing fire to keep her pinned. I know you're there, he called in accented English. Nowhere to run, American sniper. We have you trapped. Raven didn't answer. Sound would give away her exact position. She could hear others approaching now. More climbers, moving carefully, using the terrain. 4 at least, maybe more. Her shoulder was bleeding. A ricochet had caught her, tore through jacket and skin. Not deep, but enough to matter. Blood was slippery on her trigger hand. Below, in the valley, the firefight was reaching crescendo. She could hear it, the rhythm of battle changing, the enemy's fire becoming sporadic, desperate. The Rangers were winning. She'd done it, bought them enough time. Now, she just had to survive. The third climber made his move, rushing her position while his companions laid down, covering fire. Standard assault tactics. Aggressive, effective. Raven shot him twice as he cleared the rock. He crashed down 3 meters away. Her slide locked back. Empty. She dropped the pistol, grabbed her rifle, cycled the bolt. The nearest enemy was 20 meters out, already taking aim. She fired from the hip, a desperation shot, pure instinct. The bullet caught him in the throat. He went down choking. 6 rounds left. 4 more enemies, closing from 3 sides. The math had finally caught up with her. Raven pressed her back against cold stone, rifle ready, and waited for the end. Then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, an American helicopter. The UH-60 Black Hawk came in fast and low, door guns already spinning up. Tracers lit the darkness like deadly fireflies, raking the ridge where Raven's attackers had taken cover. Raven, if you can hear this, mark your position. The voice on the loudspeaker was rough with urgency. Mark your position now. She grabbed a flare from her vest, struck it, held it high. Red smoke billowed against the black sky. Target acquired, moving in. The helicopter pivoted, its downwash creating a small hurricane on the ridgetop. A rope deployed. 2 Rangers fast roped down, weapons up, securing a perimeter. "Ma'am, we need to move." One of them, a sergeant with a weathered face, grabbed her arm. "Can you walk?" "Yes." Her voice came out as a croak. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. "Then let's get the hell out of here." They hooked her to the rope. The winch activated, dragging her up through rotor wash and chaos. Hands grabbed her, pulled her into the helicopter's belly. The 2 Rangers followed seconds later. The pilot didn't wait. The Black Hawk banked hard, gaining altitude, putting distance between them and the hostile ridge. Raven collapsed against the bulkhead, suddenly aware of every injury, every ache, every moment of strain from the past 90 minutes. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold her rifle steady. A medic appeared, cutting away her jacket, examining the shoulder wound. "Entry and exit, clean through. You're lucky." She didn't feel lucky. She felt exhausted beyond anything she'd experienced before. "How?" she managed. "How did you find me?" Captain Hale pushed through the crowded compartment, his leg bandaged, his face gray with fatigue. "Your shots. The timing, the pattern, the technique. Only one person I knew could make those shots." He crouched down to her level. "You saved 11 lives today, Raven. 12, counting yourself." "Kadir?" she asked. "First kill. We confirmed it." Hale's expression softened. "It's over. Your hunt is done." The phrase hit her like a physical blow. "It's over." Thompson had whispered it in the valley, certain they were all going to die. The enemy had probably thought it too, when they had Bravo 1-2 trapped. But it wasn't over. Not then. Not because of her. "Your team," Hale continued quietly. "Ryan Cole. I served with him once. He was a good man. He'd be proud of what you did today." Raven closed her eyes, saw Ryan's face, heard his voice. "Protect the ones who can't protect themselves." "I kept my promise," she whispered. The medical tent at Forward Operating Base Davidson was organized chaos. Wounded from 3 different units crowded the space, medics and doctors moving with practiced efficiency. Raven sat on a cot, her shoulder bandaged, an IV in her arm. She'd been poked, prodded, scanned, and cleared for duty with restrictions. The restrictions meant desk work, paperwork, debriefings. She hated desk work. "Drink this." A nurse handed her a bottle of water. "All of it. You're severely dehydrated." Raven drank. The cold water felt like life itself flowing back into her body. Across the tent, she could see members of Bravo 1-2 getting treatment. Thompson was getting his hands bandaged, probably from clutching his rifle too hard. Webb had a gash on his forehead being stitched. Park was arguing with a doctor about whether his concussion warranted observation. They were alive, all 11 of them. A colonel she didn't recognize entered the tent, accompanied by 2 officers carrying tablets and recording equipment. Official inquiry. Raven had expected this. "Master Sergeant Locke," the colonel said formally. "I'm Colonel Patricia Vance, JSOC Command. I need to ask you some questions about today's engagement." "Yes, ma'am." "You were operating alone, outside of your authorized duty station, in hostile territory. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "You engaged enemy forces without orders, without support, and without authorization. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." Colonel Vance studied her for a long moment. "You also saved the lives of an entire Ranger unit, eliminated a high-value target we've been hunting for 6 months, and single-handedly disrupted an enemy operation. Is that correct?" "I had help, ma'am. Captain Hale and his team. You put 17 rounds downrange at distances exceeding 1,200 meters in adverse conditions and achieved a hit rate of approximately 82%. That's not help. That's exceptional skill." Vance's stern expression cracked slightly. "It's also completely insane. You know that, right?" Raven almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am. The official inquiry will take weeks to process. In the meantime, you're being reassigned." Vance handed her a folder. "Special Reconnaissance Sniper Lead, attached to JSOC Counterterrorism Task Force. You'll be training others, developing new tactics, and occasionally, very occasionally, and only when authorized, going back into the field." Raven opened the folder, scanned the orders. "Ma'am, I thought I was being discharged. Medical retirement. That was before you proved you're still the best we have." Vance's voice softened. "We failed you 9 months ago. Failed your team." The investigation into that ambush uncovered corruption at multiple levels, officers taking payments from hostile forces, deliberately compromising missions. 3 people are awaiting courts-martial. It doesn't bring back Ryan Cole or the others, but it's something. The tent seemed very quiet suddenly. "We'd like you back," Vance continued. "Not just for what you can do in the field, but for what you can teach. How to survive when the odds are impossible. How to keep fighting when everything says you should quit." She paused. "How to keep promises." Raven looked at the orders again, saw Ryan's face in her memory, smiling that cocky grin he'd always worn. Heard his voice. "Too mean to die." "Yes, ma'am," she said. "I'll take the assignment." 3 weeks later, at Fort Benning, a new cycle of Ranger School candidates sat in a briefing room, listening to war stories. The instructor, a grizzled master sergeant with 20 years of service, was wrapping up a lecture on long-range marksmanship. "Now, I know you're all thinking this is theoretical. Nobody really makes shots past 1,000 meters in combat. Too many variables, too much that can go wrong." He paused for effect. "But let me tell you about something that happened last month." Private First Class Jamie Rodriguez, fresh out of basic, leaned forward. This was the part she'd been waiting for, the real stories. The ones that proved training wasn't just academic exercise. A ranger unit got ambushed in the Hindu Kush. 50-plus enemy fighters, prepared positions, complete surprise. They were trapped in a valley with no air support, no artillery, and no way out. Command wrote them off. Started planning memorial services. The room was silent. Then someone started shooting from 1,200 meters away. A single sniper. 17 rounds, 14 confirmed kills, including the enemy commander. Held off the entire enemy force long enough for the Rangers to turn the battle around. 17 rounds? Someone asked skeptically. Against 50? You don't need to kill everyone. You need to kill the right ones. Leadership, heavy weapons, communications. Break their command structure, and even a large force becomes ineffective. The instructor smiled. The shooter knew that. Used every bullet like it was worth its weight in gold. "Who was it?" Rodriguez asked. "Classified. But I can tell you this, it was a woman, Master Sergeant, JSOC sniper. And before that mission, she'd been missing for months, hunting the men who killed her team. Everyone thought she'd gone rogue. Turns out she was just keeping a promise." Another candidate raised his hand. "Is she real? Or is this one of those stories that gets exaggerated?" "Real as it gets. I know because I was there." Captain Jordan Hale stood at the back of the room, unnoticed until now. He walked to the front, nodding to the instructor. "Master Sergeant, mind if I take over for a minute?" "All yours, sir." Hale faced the candidates. "You're going to hear a lot of stories in your career. Some true, some embellished, some complete fiction. But here's something I learned that night. When someone tells you it's over, when the situation looks hopeless and the numbers are against you, remember that somewhere out there might be someone who refuses to accept it. Someone who'll climb a mountain in the dark, take an impossible shot, and fight until they physically can't fight anymore." He let that sink in. "The sniper who saved my unit is back in service now, training the next generation, teaching people like you how to survive when survival seems impossible. And if you're very lucky, you might serve with her someday. Learn from her." Rodriguez's hand shot up again. "What's her name, sir?" Hale smiled. "She doesn't like publicity, but her call sign is Raven. Remember that name. Because the next time someone tells you something can't be done, the next time the mission seems too hard or the distance too far, remember what Raven did at 1,200 meters. After the class, Rodriguez found Hale outside the building. "Sir, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "When you were trapped in that valley, when it looked like you weren't going to make it, what did you feel when the first shot came?" Hale considered the question. Confusion, then hope, then absolute determination not to waste the chance she was giving us. He met Rodriguez's eyes. "But you want to know what I remember most?" "Yes, sir." "The sound. Not the gunshot, I barely heard those at that distance. But the sound of my men breathing again. Really breathing. Like they'd remembered how. That's what hope sounds like when it comes back from the dead." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Thank you, sir." She returned to the barracks that night, thinking about impossible shots and promises kept. About how sometimes one person, in the right place with the right skills and enough refusal to quit, could change everything. In a small office across the base, Raven sat at a desk reviewing training protocols. Her shoulders still ached on cold days. She still saw Ryan's face sometimes when she closed her eyes. Still woke up from nightmares about that ambush 9 months ago. But she also saw the faces of Bravo 1-2. Saw them alive, walking around, going home to their families. Kept promises mattered. On her desk, next to a stack of training manuals, sat a single 300 Winchester Magnum cartridge. Not fired, never to be fired. A memorial to 17 rounds that had made the difference between life and death. She picked it up, felt its weight. Outside, she could hear drill sergeants shouting at recruits, helicopters taking off for training runs, the constant noise of a military base in motion. She set the bullet down carefully, picked up her pen, and went back to work. There were promises yet to keep.